If there's a crisis, and to some degree, that kind of came from my Willing Way days, because we would go above and beyond. Which that's a point of difference from us. I mean, so most other IOPs, I believe, are either run by or controlled by clinicians.
Sure.
Okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But they think like clinicians. So you guys have a protocol you have to follow, right? There are things that you can't do that I can do as an interventionist, as an example.
True. Yeah.
Right. So we pull out all the stops if we think it's needed, and that's everybody at Welwynn has done that. We've gone to people's homes when we've gotten phone calls that they're in trouble and helped them get into the hospital, to detox, or to treatment.
All right, so today on the Finding New Waters podcast, we have Lewis Finch with us today as a guest. And Lewis Finch is the founder of Welwynn Outpatient Center here in Raleigh, North Carolina.
You are correct, sir.
And we're pleased to have you with us. We appreciate you taking some time out of your day.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
My days are pretty empty these days.
Are they?
So, semi-retired.
Well, that's cool. I'm
You
glad
know
to
that?
hear that. I did not know that. I know a time not very long ago where your days were not very empty.
No, they were not. But
yeah.
It's nice to get old and do what I'm doing now. But yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's
man.
cool. So Lewis, would you mind maybe we could start by just telling the audience, a little bit about you and kind of Welwynn and how things started and all that good stuff.
Okay. So I am 67 years old. I got sober at 51. So you can do the math on that.
Sure.
And it was a pretty rocky ride. I started drinking and doing other things at the age of 13. And so I had about a 38-year drinking and drugging career. But during that time span, I was also a fairly successful businessman. I founded an advertising agency that at one time was a fairly large player in the market here in Raleigh, primarily because of our largest account, a little sandwich chain called Subway. But during that time period, my addiction ramped up pretty quickly. When I got sober, I ended up going to a small treatment center down in Georgia, Willing Way, which some of you may know, and coming out. And after I got sober, in order, the very next year, my father died. The year after that, my wife died. And the year after that, my mother died. Now I'm sober, but I am batshit crazy. Okay, I mean I'm out of my mind. So I ended up selling the agency and literally spreading all the stuff that I had. I sold our homes, I gave our furniture away to my daughters, and I moved up to a lake about an hour north of here in a buddy's double wide mobile home.
Wow.
And just tried to repair myself. What I realized was, and that was my first retirement. What I realized was, I don't do very well at retirement. So when I say I'll be semi-retired till I drop dead. But when I was up there, it allowed me to focus on a lot of things, one of which was my recovery. And I ended up going back to work for the same treatment center that I went to.
Willing Way. Okay.
As the admissions and marketing director. I learned the business of addiction treatment from the ground up. So everybody who came in there, I met their families. I got to work really at a very, very base level. I got to work. So we had virtually no advertising budget. I mean, it was a kind of a joke. So I was able to convince them, the people who owned it at the time, to let me contact the folks at the Intervention TV show that A&E put on.
Okay.
So during that time period, we had three of their clients that came through us, and we not only got national exposure there, we also got it on Dr. Phil.
Oh wow. Okay.
But where I'm going with this is, I learned the business of interventions too. That's what introduced me to it. About a year into my stay with them, it was apparent they were going to be sold. So I came back to Raleigh, and I had this idea in my head for a outpatient treatment center. I really didn't. I'll be honest with you, I didn't really understand it. All I knew was that when I went to treatment at 51, I was in there with 18 and 20-year-old meth and heroin addicts. I mean, other than the fact that we're suffering from the same disease, I didn't have a whole lot of life experience that they had.
Right.
Most of these people hadn't even had jobs. So I thought to myself, what if you could build something that would appeal primarily to executives, professionals, and their families? That's what Welwynn is. It serves a niche population of people who I now know if we weren't there, a good chunk of them wouldn't get help, or they would come out of their experience criticizing what they'd gone through in a lot of cases, because they wouldn't be with their peers. So ours is a peer-to-peer. I mean, you guys know this. It's there are treatment centers that cater to emerging adults, men, women. So it's really no different than that. It's just we took a demographic that I felt like was underserved, and we applied certain things to it. Like it's really nice, a lot like New Waters, right? It's one of the reasons we refer here.
Sure,
our folks are great fits for you guys, and we treat people like adults. I mean, it really does boil down to that. We're very holistic in nature. And we opened in May of 2016, so we've been open over 7 years. So right at
awesome.
7th anniversary. Yeah, it really is. And I think we've done some really good things. I'm pleased from that standpoint. So
that's great.
Cool. What are you going to do now with your semi-retirement? Keep yourself busy.
Well, getting back to the intervention thing. So when we first opened up, we were having people come to us who typically would be our clients, like older adults, people my age even, who had children who needed help. They didn't know where to go. This is strictly my opinion. They came to us because they felt comfortable because we appealed to an older group, right? And as a result, we were referring to interventionists. And I was getting blowback from a number of people I referred to. They either weren't doing the job or they weren't doing the job that the client expected them to do. So I said, well, you know what? If I'm going to get the criticism, I'm going to build it into my business model. So several of us went off and got trained to how to do interventions. Now, again, if you remember, I told you I had some help in that, because the interventionists on the show Intervention really helped me in just simple conversations with them and watching how they dealt with it. So that to answer your question, Justin, I couldn't do what you do. I've said this. Sitting across from somebody and listening to them whine and complain all day long, it's not my idea of fun. Right? I can take short bursts of that. That's what I like about that process, because it usually is at the most a 1 month process. In most cases, it's a week. In some cases, it's a day. So we've over the last we did do them 7 years ago. We didn't do as many. We've probably done 150, 200 interventions.
Okay, wow.
And up to this point, everybody we've intervened on has gotten help.
That's great.
But it's because we use tactics, and because the client, in our case, is the person who's coming to us for help. It's not the person of concern, like the addict or alcoholic. If we can get the parent or the spouse moving in a certain direction, usually that will trigger the person of concern to go to get help and do what they need to do. And then we also we case manage folks. But I moved to a lake about an hour away from here, and I spend a good chunk of my time with my grandchildren and my daughters.
That's great, man.
Yeah, so
That's great.
But I still come in,
Still staying active. I mean, I think I know you. I've known you for a while now, anyway, and I feel like I know you well enough to where I can't imagine you would ever be able to completely pull away from it.
Well, I learned that when I retired that first time. Yeah. I mean, to say I was miserable is an understatement.
Sure.
I've got to keep moving.
Yeah.
And I've heard that I think there's some statistic that once you retire, you're dead within 2 years or something like that. I can see that because without that purpose in life, there's really no motivation.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
And you know this, the work we do, guys, is a whole lot different than, in my past advertising career, if I made a mistake, the worst thing that would happen, a commercial would run wrong, right?
Sure.
In this particular case, people die.
That's the truth.
And lives are ruined.
Yeah.
So this is really, really important stuff we're doing.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned purpose, and I think that's true for the clients that we serve, right? Is that, really at the essence of it all, I think that's what we're trying to do in this industry as a whole, is trying to help people find that purpose again, essentially.
Correct.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. It's not always evident either.
Speaking of purpose, I'd been sober about 5 months. I got sober, went back to my job, and then resigned. And then all I did was play golf and go to AA meetings for like 5 or 6 months. I had lunch with my stepfather one day, and he said, "So what's going on with the work?" And I said, "Well, I've been doing this and doing that, and I'm sober and going to all these meetings." And he said, "Well, I'm so happy for you. I'm so proud of you." It may have been the same day I actually made an amends to him, and we were having lunch. And he said, "But what? You need a purpose." And I was sitting there just tooting my own horn for being sober for 5 whole months. And then, I look back on that time, and it was really dangerous to have that much time off, newly sober, or any time. And I know what you mean. I mean, I used to be a loaf, and now if I'm not doing something, I feel almost guilty about it.
Sure.
I have to be almost told by my friends in recovery to take some time and just hang out, because I need a purpose, and I have an amazing purpose now. It's not just a job, because I did have a job for a couple of years in sobriety before I started working in this field. And like you said, sending the wrong, invoice to somebody 3 or 4 years ago for me would be the worst thing that happened. But now it's like, somebody is not getting help, and that can lead to death or worse. And I talk to families sometimes when I'm talking about what could happen. I say, he or she can end up dead or worse. And they say, what can be worse? And I say, they hurt or kill somebody and they stay alive, and so it is, we are doing important work.
Well, it's funny you should bring this up. Real early when we opened up, we had a situation where a mother called in, and her son, who was going to East Carolina, had come home the weekend, the day before, and they had found white powder, which turned out to be heroin. And she was asking for our, again, the intervention kind of thing. He wouldn't have been a fit for us because he was a college kid, but she wanted to know what to do. And we said, you need to get him treatment now.
Yeah.
Well, it was the end of the semester, and he had to take exams. This was on a Monday. He had an exam on Thursday and one on Friday. And she said, we'll get him in here. He was gonna graduate on Saturday. Okay, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday. He died Friday night. And what that taught me, because you can soft pedal this. If you, I mean, you can,
Yeah.
you know, you can soft. I don't soft pedal it anymore.
Yeah.
I've seen, if you've been in this business long enough, you've seen the problems that come with this, and so that family has changed now forever. It'll never be that. They'll never have grandchildren from him. There'll be always a hole somewhere in that family. Yeah. And when I talk to particularly parents of kids, and I've got 6 grandchildren, I'm thinking of them the whole time, because I know how I would do if I found anything, and my grandkids know my story, and I don't soft pedal anymore. You can't. Mm-hmm. It means too much.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. You know, and that's a horrible story, but I think the reality is that we hear those kinds of stories all the time. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate, you know, and I think you know, a message to get across to people is exactly that. And I know we have these kinds of conversations. I know you do all the time, is that when you're on the phone with someone or you're seeking help, like if it's gotten to a point to where like there is an issue and someone is trying to address it, right? To your point, Lewis, I think the time to take action is then, right? Mm-hmm. Not tomorrow, not a week later. And especially, you know, at New Waters, I mean, primarily what we do is detox and stabilization. So it's always interesting, even though we see it over and over again. It's very interesting how we're on the phone with someone on the kind of pre-admission side of things, and they're trying to kind of, you know, quote unquote, schedule their.
They're
detox,
negotiating
right?
with you,
yeah.
right?
They're negotiating.
Negotiation.
It really is, sense, right? Because absolutely. So it's
and you know this. No one comes in here on a winning streak.
Right. Right? No, absolutely.
Something has happened.
Things are not good.
Usually, several things have happened. But it's usually one final event that somebody's in their history, or it could be the legal system, it could be a parent, a spouse, or their employer.
Yeah.
But I jokingly say no one walks through our front door with a smile on their face.
Yeah. You're exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, so people will try to, you know, they're trying to schedule their admission, right? And we get it, right? We get it. Life's going on. There's things that are happening. You know, kids got to go to things, like all the excuses and all the reasons, real reasons. However, that story is a good representation of.
So again, let's know the story here. Mm-hmm. So we had a woman, I would say 45-ish or so, who kept calling and talking to us about coming in, but she could not. She couldn't work it around her work. She could not. You know, we have 3 groups. She couldn't get it to work around her schedule, but she kept calling, and her situation kept getting worse and worse every call she made. When the last time she called, we scheduled for her to come in, and she was planning on coming to the program. The very next day, her children were taken away from her, and she never came in,
right?
Because it was over with, you know.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. I was telling somebody this the other day. If you remember before COVID, more people were dying from alcohol abuse, than were from drugs, overdoses.
Yeah.
You can look it up. I think the number is like 70,000 people from alcohol, and maybe 55, but the number was growing, right? Mm-hmm. The problem now is it's so dire. I mean, it's one thing to drink yourself to death. It's another thing to snort what you think is coke,
right?
Or you know, shoot up what you think is heroin, and it turns out to be fentanyl.
Yeah. And
you're done. You're toast.
Yeah. And we see that, I'm sure you guys do too, on a, you know, sometimes daily basis, individuals that were, they thought they were snorting cocaine, or they thought they were taking, you know, pills that they were getting from a friend. I mean, and just the whole spectrum of individuals and walks of life that come in here. And it's not until they're here and we're doing a drug test and finding out what's going on that they are very amazed that they have fentanyl in their system. And it happens all the time. And then, of course, there's a portion of individuals that they're very aware that that's what's going on. But it happens all the time, right? I mean, it's a stay-at-home mom, or I mean, just literally anybody, right? And they come in and they're like, well, I'm just doing X, Y, and Z. And then they're very taken aback when we're like, well, you have fentanyl in your system, you know, and that really changes the trajectory of the detox, right?
Well, and luckily the media is playing it up.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Absolutely.
They are. But at the same time, the alcohol related stuff. We've had 5 people who were in our program that once they discharged died. 5, 4 of them for alcohol, 1 for drugs,
Right.
which doesn't match the narrative that you hear in the media.
True.
But again, it takes you a while to drink yourself to death. You can die from a heroin overdose or a fentanyl overdose the second you do it,
Yeah.
as you know.
Yeah.
And then talking about when coronavirus hit, none of us were prepared for that. I know you guys have seen this, but there's been a uptick in mental health issues as well.
Absolutely.
And you had people having wine parties at home by themselves, and so last fall we applied for our mental health license, and so we're now a duly licensed addiction and mental health treatment program.
That's
on
great.
an outpatient basis. So we can treat practically anybody who comes in the door. I mean, to some degree, where it's still outpatient. I mean,
Right. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I know, just for anybody that's watching or listening to this, more specifically, like the levels of care and like what you guys do. So it is outpatient, so there's no kind of residential component to it whatsoever. Yeah.
No, it's the term is in IOP, and it basically boils down to you're attending group sessions and some individual sessions. And over the course of a week, you might get 10 hours or more of therapy.
Okay.
As opposed to, say, when you get a residential treatment, you would be, you'd be there 24 hours a day and be monitored.
Right.
Well, like you guys, you'd be here, observed heavily for, 7 to 10 days.
Right.
But yeah, so there are different levels of it. Obviously, there's PHP, partial hospitalization. You guys know it's a more intense. It's like I refer to it as residential treatment in your own bed, because I don't think you can work. I guess you could. It'd be kind of difficult.
Right.
But yeah, and the reason that when I chose the business model I did, the reason I chose IOP, there's a study online that some government agency did. I've got a copy of it. I just don't, but it was done about comparing residential treatment to intensive outpatient, is what we are. And it showed the results were about the same, which I found fascinating. Why would you go away? Well, the answer is very simple. You need to be, you brought up, you need to be stabilized, right?
Right.
You can't be coming into our groups doing your drug of choice. It doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
So, we're done. You know that.
People try.
People try it all the time. But so intensive outpatient is to me is unique because it allows you to come in on a Monday, get some help, leave and go home and interact with your family and friends, sleep at home, think about what you've learned, spend another day in the real world, then come in for treatment the next day and process it.
Yeah.
Which, in its real world, it's not a bubble. It's damn near impossible to relapse when you're in a residential treatment program. You got to really work at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can relapse all the time in intensive outpatient, but it's the work that you do to get someone away from that mindset that really, to me, separates residential treatment from intensive outpatient.
Right.
What percentage of your clients at Welwynn come from residential treatment versus they're stable enough to come in, or they come from a place like New Waters?
Well, and you guys are in that same boat. I mean, you guys refer to us.
That's correct.
I want to say,
but I mean residential, like a 28 to 30 day program versus just detox or didn't need.
Okay. Maybe 25%
come from treatment centers.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Or they may not be referred from the treatment center, but well, that's not true. I think it's about 25%. And then, well, remember, as I brought up at the beginning, no one wants to go to treatment.
Right.
So they'll do anything they can
Right.
to get it. Okay. So So it'd probably be a lot higher if they recognized what they were doing. I mean, because if you're, and Justin, I know you've done screenings all the time and assessments.
Mm-hmm.
If you do the assessment right, you should know from the assessment if the person's a fit for intensive outpatient
Absolutely.
versus PHP or residential.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't keep people just because they want to come to us.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Right.
if they are too acute, we may give them some parameters around which they can't, they got to test negative for whatever substance is, and we can put together a plan for them, but it doesn't behoove us to bring somebody in. It's been disruptive. Well, you used to run groups for us.
That's exactly right.
You
I
know,
sure did.
it's
Yeah.
very disruptive to have somebody in there, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another
it happens here, but they're already here.
Right. Yeah.
One thing I'll comment on, just as you mentioned, previous history, full disclosure, I actually used to work for Lewis back in
No,
2017.
I worked for you.
Some combination of that, right? So one thing I think, just to sing the praises of Welwynn a little bit here, that I think you guys do different than a lot of other IOPs, your typical kind of standard IOP setup, is that you guys are really typically willing to really pull out all the stops and meet the client where they are. So even though it is intensive outpatient IOP, which is, like you said, about 10 hours a week, I mean, I know from firsthand experience, if a client meets that criteria for that outpatient level of care, but they really need more, support than just 10 hours a week. I've seen you guys, just time and time again, be able to just kind of create something that's going to work for them, which is really cool.
Well, and it is cool. I didn't know everybody didn't do that when we first opened up.
Sure.
I thought that was just part of the gig.
Yeah.
If there's a crisis, and to some degree, that kind of came from my Willing Way days, because we would go above and beyond. Which that's a point of difference from us. I mean, so most other IOPs, I believe, are either run by or controlled by clinicians.
Sure.
Okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But they think like clinicians. So you guys have a protocol you have to follow, right? There are things that you can't do that I can do as an interventionist, as an example.
True. Yeah.
Right. So we pull out all the stops if we think it's needed, and that's everybody at Welwynn has done that. We've gone to people's homes when we've gotten phone calls that they're in trouble and helped them go get into the hospital, to detox, or to treatment.
You've brought them directly
I
here
brought them
from
directly
their
from here.
homes.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and I know right now we have a former client who they're customized a treatment plan where they go see her at her house and do what needs to be done.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah.
I think that's just great, because the reality is there is this kind of gray area, I think, that exists in between, like, residential treatment, like you said, which, I think is absolutely appropriate in certain cases, right? But there's just a big difference in between that 24-hour supervision and support that's offered at the residential level and an outpatient level, regardless, even if that is a partial hospitalization where they're doing 20, 25 hours a week. There's still gaps there, right? If they're early enough in their recovery process, they're still going to be struggling with cravings and just emotional dysregulation and things like that. And there's nothing really in between those two levels of care. And again, I think that's something that's just really unique about Welwynn, is the fact that you guys can just pull in other services, right? Be able to, go into the home, whether that's, a sober coach that can be there that you guys can employ to work with you guys, just checking in on them, having them come into the office and do. I remember, back when I was with Welwynn, we'd have people, I'm sure you guys probably still do this, like, they worked from home, and like, it just didn't make sense for them to be in the house working alone. So they would just bring in their computers and put them in the office. I forget
about that. We've had several people. We had one young lady who studied for and got her master's degree on our couch.
That's great.
But to your point,
Yeah.
she couldn't stay home. She was gonna do something that she shouldn't do at home. So we just said, come in, eat our snacks. We can order lunch when it's time for lunch. Sit down and enjoy the couch, and she did, and she's, to my knowledge, she's still sober.
That's awesome, man. That is awesome.
But that's, again, it goes back to that. There's probably some problem with that in your field. Okay, it's not in mine.
Yeah, I
Okay?
hear you.
So
yeah, and that's great, man. I think it's great because, again, I think we have to be able to meet clients where they are, right? And everybody's needs are unique and different. And, I think that's something that's very concierge about Welwynn, is the fact that you guys are willing to, work with them and identify what those needs are and just get creative about, how can you help them, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I was thinking about this the other day. When someone calls in, we set up 3 screenings. One is the typical screening that a therapist would do. The second one is a cultural screening, and it may sound bougie, but it's meant to protect them and us.
Sure.
Because if they're not a fit culturally for us, we have to figure out where we want to refer them to.
Yeah.
As an example, we had a father. No, actually, that's not true. Your guest on your last show, Trip.
Okay.
Trip Johnson called me up one day and said, "I've got a 20-year-old college student I think would be a good fit for you." And Trip knows who we see. And I said, "Well, Trip, that didn't sound like somebody that we could take in." He said, "Just talk to him." This kid was much more mature than I am at 20. In MBA school, I think, at 20.
Oh, wow.
He just couldn't stop drinking. And so we talked to his parents, we talked to him. And I interviewed him, and at least one other person interviewed him. And he really, really wanted to come in. So we said, well, we'll give it a shot. He did everything he was asked to do. And he felt more at home because, not that there's anything wrong at all with Green Hill. They address a population that I wouldn't touch, right? Because they're so, but he wasn't going to fit in with that group. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I remember. I've heard you tell me that. I've heard that story before.
Well, and and then in addition to the other 2 screenings, we'd also do a financial screening.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and that's not to convince them to come into our program. They're either going to do it or they're not. But it's to figure out, if they can't come into our program, what's the best next option.
I think that's smart.
I want to say 90% of the people who contact us and come in are referred somewhere else, either to you guys for detox or to a residential treatment program for, again, stabilization.
Yeah.
Or to another IOP.
Okay. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, I would say somewhere between 80 and 90% of the calls we get were referred to somebody for whatever reason, whether it's wrong level of care, insurance, resources, whatever it is.
But you know that you're going to refer them to the best place.
Exactly.
They would never know where to go.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think that's, one of the marks of a quality treatment center, right? Is that, you're not an establishment that's going to just try and make it work, whatever it is, right? Is that you really understand, what you do well. And if that person's not going to be a good fit, or you're not going to be able to provide the services that are going to meet their needs, then that is our job, right? It's our role to find them the place that can provide that,
Well, and Welwynn, like New Waters, are independent and not affiliated or owned by anybody else. So we're only going to send them to what makes sense, and there's no expectations for like the mothership to get them somewhere else or anything like that.
Absolutely.
Well, and they look, when anyone comes to either us or you guys, they have no clue. They've been told lots of stuff. They'll Google everything. And everybody's website looks great, except mine, by the way. Okay, but everybody's website looks awesome. But we know the good programs from the bad ones because we intentionally get to know. That was the other. So I forgot to mention this. So as a result of when we first got into the business, there was virtually no collaboration going on, none. You had 2 camps. You had the UNC healthcare camp. You had the Duke Hospital camp, and they weren't talking to each other either.
Right.
And they weren't referring to hardly anybody. So we started having a networking event.
Right.
We do it once a month. It's done the 3rd Thursday of every month, and we'll see anywhere between 35 and 95 people, therapists, other treatment providers in the market, or even outside of the market, will come to it. And it's created this dynamic where it really opens up well, you had Trip on last week.
Mm-hmm.
You had the week before. Didn't you have? I saw her, the therapist.
Which one?
There's been a lot.
We have a lot.
That's kind of. Well, anyway, so, but that's the way we get to know these people.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, we wouldn't.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So, that to me is probably just as important as getting them into treatment, getting them to the right place.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm going to toot y'all's horn. Graham I met Graham when I first got into the business. I went to Moments of Change down in West Palm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when he was the business development person for Voyage Treatment Center, Voyage Recovery. And I ran into, and he took me over to the facility and showed it to me, and I really didn't even understand what I was looking at back then. I was 7 years ago. But he stuck with me, and I learned, because that was one of the first people that ever paid any attention to me at all. Okay, I'm this guy from North Carolina who has this IOP that just opened up, and so what, right? Well, over time, over the years, he and I kind of stayed in touch with one another. Wasn't anything. I don't even think I referred to him until he left.
Right.
Okay, down to Voyage. But about 2.5 or 3 years ago, he called me up and he said he was coming into town, and he presented this idea to me of a detox. Well, we need a detox so badly in this area. You guys know this.
Oh yeah.
This is probably the one thing that's been missing, and I was elated. I was absolutely elated. So I mean, that's one of the reasons that we refer to you guys every chance we get, because I know again, a referral for me is my reputation on the line, as is yours to me.
Absolutely.
So you've got to be able to count on that person to deliver what they say they're going to do, and that's, you guys deliver, and that's, but it's kind of a roundabout way. So when Graham put this program together, I was probably the single biggest advocate, and he knows it too, because I was chomping at a bit, particularly given how close you guys are to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somebody can walk in our door, stumble in our door, and we can tell them they can walk down here and stumble in your door.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true. You guys are 5 minutes, maybe.
It's 4.3 miles.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, well, and again, what you represent is what we represent.
Yeah, that's true.
True.
There's a lot of synergies there for sure.
Very much.
Absolutely. So I'm trying to think. So you were talking about the IOP. You did say you recently got licensed for the mental health.
So glad you brought it. Okay, so again, not knowing what mental health IOP means, we were actually encouraged to open it because there's a flood of people seeking mental health treatment.
Absolutely.
And people, we have a fairly good reputation. I think I can say that.
Agree.
And so we were actually fast tracked by the state on our license.
Oh wow!
It was a lot quicker than we anticipated. I did not know that mental health IOP was different from addiction. That's another reason I'm not a therapist, right? I hire people with a lot more common sense than I do. And it's a more structured process because evidently those people are a lot more fragile and things can trigger them a whole lot quicker, I've been told. So the IOP process the IOP mental health process is more structured. It has a curriculum that you really don't waver from. So, in IOP, typical IOP, the therapist will come in with a plan, but the plan can blow up if someone comes in the group and reports that they're having a problem, right? Mm-hmm. You've seen it, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. I don't necessarily think that happens that much with the mental health side. Now, if someone comes in obviously distressed, then I'm sure they're going to address it, but it's just a more structured process. Mm-hmm. The other thing I was going to say too, one of the things I'm most proud of with us, I looked back at our our clientele 2 years ago and last year and this year. The average stay at us, and this includes somebody who would come in and stay for a day and leave.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be a guy who's been there and he's gone through IOP, he's in continuing care, and or he's doing individual counseling. The average stay for a person in that census was 122 days.
Wow, that's great.
And you and I know that the key to recovery is length of time and consistency.
Absolutely.
You have a better chance the longer you're there. I mean, even for residential treatment programs, you're better off keeping them 90 days if you can than 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we do a really, really good job in that regard of making it a place they want to stay, because they don't have to stay with us. I mean, there are plenty of other places in town to get help.
Sure.
But that's one of the things I've always been proud of, that number to me. And I didn't realize that was that unique.
So a question for you around that. What do you think it is? And I know we're talking a lot about the things that make Welwynn different, but what do you think is the thing, if you had to put your finger on something?
I knew you were going to ask me that.
What's the thing that makes them want to stay?
I don't know. We have a mindset. We have a mindset there, and you can't last if you don't match our culture.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to last very long. I mean, you're not. I mean, we have people come and go, but they're coming and going for most of the time all the right reasons. Like they're moving their careers on, right?
Right.
You're a good example, right?
Sure.
But the people who come in have the mindset of being. I'm trying to think of the servants' hearts. I think that's the key to what we do. That regardless of whether that person who calls in, and we have people who call in all the time who absolutely, you can tell over the phone, they're not going to be a client of ours, okay, for whatever reason. We don't just kick them off the phone. We'll everybody's asked to come in. Everybody is screened, and then we provide them with an alternative if we're not it. And I to that point, I think that's the difference.
Okay.
And we don't always get it right, but
Sure.
what we bend over backwards to so that we can rest at night.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
Well, I would have said the answer to that would be the same way that New Waters is very nice facility. Welwynn's a very nice facility, very welcoming, but all that's material.
Right.
You know, it's all about
Right.
the people and the people in there doing the next right thing. And I mean, I feel love in there when I go in there, and everybody seems to be very happy in there. And that, it's
We have I honestly don't. I can't take credit for it. I mean, I am no longer at the top of the food chain. Will Guest is. He's our new CEO.
Right.
Been that way since the first of the year. And I'd been looking for somebody an old man, right? Okay. I had hair when I started this. No, I didn't. No, I'm lying now. So I was, but this is another ironic. I just thought about this. So Will is exactly 25 years younger than me.
Oh, wow.
And I've been looking for a successor, someone to take. Literally, he was born the same day I was born.
Really? How about that?
January the 3rd.
How about that?
Only 25 years before. But he carries that on. He's probably, he's probably a softer, gentler version of me. I think, I don't know, maybe he hasn't been beaten down by life like I have, but he fulfills what I felt like was needed in that position.
That's
it was a good pick.
I think so. And he plopped in my lap.
Yeah.
So, you brought the look of the place, right? The appearance of the place. I did the math on it. It's amazing to me how little difference it was to buy the stuff we bought to fill the place. I mean, we've got antiques there. Some of it was given to us. But our furniture is nice and comfortable. The cost difference to build that out was not a whole lot more, if at all, than if you just did the basic clinical look. And it's just more. It feels more warm.
Right.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
And we've got 2 rooms that no therapy is done in. They're the 2 biggest rooms in the entire place. One on the mental health side and one on the addiction side. And it's just a place for people to gather. It's where that young girl sat and got her MBA
That's great.
or master's, whatever it was. But yeah, that's kind of to the difference, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a reflection too of how things go there too.
Yes.
But it's really all about the people and the ethos that you practice there.
And we've had issues from time to time, but we, like any business, right? I said, look, don't let the clients see the sausage being made.
Right.
Just feed them the sausage, okay? Because if you watch the sausage being made, you won't eat it,
Right.
okay? And every business is like that. There's always this chaos in the back that you don't want your clients to see, particularly our clients who are we're going through some tough stuff in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool.
Well, Lewis, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming
Lewis,
in and chatting
thank you
with
so
us.
much,
It's a pleasure. And guys, we'll make sure to put, like in the show notes, we'll make sure to put some links to Welwynn and the website. So if you want to learn more about Welwynn, we'll put some information there where you can read a little bit more on the website. Even though Lewis says it's not a great one, we think it is.
Well, again, coming from the advertising world, I'm very critical of it, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah. And we'll also make sure to put contact information as well, because another thing I know that Welwynn does is anybody can call you guys and you're willing to bring them in and do a screening.
Oh, yeah.
And like you said, whether a good fit for Welwynn or if they need other services, you guys will help navigate them through that process.
So again, to that point, we getting calls for folks needing medication management, MAT,
Sure.
okay, MAT, and we don't chase them away. We don't give them a number. We ask them to come in, so we have a conversation to figure out exactly what it is they need.
That's great.
And then we will refer them to the best next option.
That's great.
Yeah. So
That's a huge service, hugely needed service for sure. So again, Lewis, thank you. It's always a pleasure hanging out with you, man.
are you ready to come back to work for me?
I'm not going to answer that.
Graham,
I'm sure Graham would not approve of that.
you ready? I'm just
All right, Lewis. Thanks, man.
Thank
we
you,
look forward to
Lewis.
talking to you again soon. Okay.
thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.